And also go to so it should be streaming now to verify how else did I do this on here? Yeah, I did. Yeah, on the Illinois live video. Yeah, I'm going to try to also update the embed code. I think you're right, but here, just to be sure. Copy. Yeah, you're right, I did. Just to be sure. There it is again. Okay, so we should be good. We are good to go, guys.
Good to go. Call this meeting to order. Christine, call the roll, please.
Let's see right now how it seems.
Here.
Jack Laney,
Sure.
Jack Laney,
Yeah, oh. Yeah, pretty good.
Joe
Thanks.
Cash,
Here.
Mark McDonald,
Here.
David McDowell,
Here.
Virginia Chambliss. Here. Jack Laney, are you on the call? Maybe you can check in on a few minutes.
I have a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
I'm just,
We don't have that on there.
We don't have it anyway here, do we? No, disregard that then. This meeting was called to go over the priorities of the IPNL before we get started. Where's something she wants to say?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to just touch on the motion that I had made at my very first meeting, where I made a protocol error, and I would like to apologize for that. I made a motion without recognizing that it needed to be submitted to this committee in advance, so please pardon my breach of etiquette as I learned. The other was that I made a bad motion. I made a motion requesting the PUAB recommend that we suspend shutoffs for families who are in school, as opposed to making a motion that we ask staff to investigate whether that was something that the school districts needed or wanted, and what the impact that would have been on processes for the utilities. So please chalk that up to being a newbie and not knowing all the protocols at the beginning. So I will do my best to make better motions in the future. After the staff went and visited with the independent school district, they actually asked that not be extended because they felt like it would make it more difficult for families to come to school. And that instead we consider putting that on hold for reconsideration should the school district go back to full-time online, where that would be something that family partnership would need to be considered. So thank you for indulging me in that address. Mr. Foreman.
Thank you, Regent. We're all on here every day as we meet. Something new comes up. Don't feel bad at all. Okay, with that, I guess we'll go right into the discussion of the IPL strategic planning goals. And we'll have Mr. Neal present his, and then we'll ask questions and discuss what we think, okay? Unless anybody else has something else they want to say.
Mr. Porter, sorry, sitting behind you, I apologize. I'm not quite sure how to get your attention. I hope that we can take a moment to frame the conversation before we begin with the priorities. And just my understanding that the duties of the utility itself, the three utilities that we govern, are to ensure a well-staffed, well-maintained utility system that meets its regulatory requirements and the current and future needs of the community. And that the utilities have those important responsibilities for reliable quality service, for public health responsibilities, when you think of sewer and water especially, environmental responsibilities, and the ability to support local economic growth. And the PUAB itself has that job to think of itself entirely as a policy body, not a management body, not a management board. That means that we are responsible for promoting policies that make sense for the growth and continuation of a stable and reliable system, that they are consistently applied across the three utilities, that we have workplace policies that are reasonable across the industry with consistent application of those policies, that we keep an eye to future challenges and changes, that we pay attention to overall system performance and emergency preparedness. And that leads you to the point where you have a strategic plan, a thoughtful, deliberate, informed process that is made in collaboration with staff, with responsibilities of this body, and that collaborative document is informed by the multiple studies that have been engaged in the past. That should provide us with guideposts, timelines, and sequencing. And I hope that we are very thoughtful about taking the time we need to produce a document that we would be proud of, that would guide us for the next 3 to 5 years. And with that, I hope that we are willing to dedicate the time and energy it takes to make one that is workable for the staff and takes into account the important guidance that we've received from our multiple studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Mayo?
Mr. Chairman, board members, as Mr. Campbell said, to frame this so that we have an understanding of what we're trying to do and where we're trying to go. This list of priorities kind of follows on with the effort that Adam did 9 months, almost, well, more than 9 months ago, almost 11 months ago, to provide a targeted list of priorities that IPL staff could be directed to focus on to help get through some of the challenges that we had at the time. That process worked very well. We were able to accomplish, to focus the staff and accomplish most of those goals over the last 11 months. So taking that in mind, looking at the inputs that we received from each of you, the discussions that we've had over the last couple of months, spending time with IPL staff members to look at what they saw as different challenges and priorities, as well as both the city analyst report and the study that we had commissioned through DKMT. All of those inputs combined to try to distill something down that would be a high-level targeted plan, but again, something we could hand to me and the IPL staff so that it would help direct our work over the coming months. With that in mind, I took the inputs that we had received from several of you, the one-on-one meetings that we had over the last couple of months, and kind of took those inputs and combined them into, instead of having 30 or 40 line items for you all to try to sort through, collected those into what I came up with was nine specific areas, and then grouped some of those as bullets underneath them. Each of these are an area that the IPL staff can directly affect, areas that they can focus their efforts on collaboratively as well as individually to help move this process forward. What we're asking from you all is, and again, you'll also have your own inputs that you want us to consider. But our goal is that you would that we would have something we could present that the PUAB would endorse to the council as a goals and objectives list for IPL. How you go about doing those priorities. Swan submitted he provided a kind of a point system that you could consider. Other ways that the groups have done these is that each of you gets 10 points and you can assign those 10 points to the 9 items however you want, with 5 on your most important and however you would like to do that. We would take all your inputs, distill those down, and present back to you the final results showing where you as a body established or came up with those priorities. That we could present to the board next week at a regular scheduled meeting, and then from there track you all could have a resolution or a recommendation that going to council, to adopt that list. With that being said, I'll have you take any questions that you might have about this list, how I came up with it, what some of you have questions about what some of these line items mean. And then we can continue the discussion as you see fit, and what your priorities.
First of all, I don't want to extend more. You're establishing criteria. As opposed to not really voting on having a criteria.
Just to go back and repeat what I just said. I don't want to necessarily defend what I said out. I just wanted to establish criteria. As we said, we just vote on our favorite one, if it's a high priority, whatever. And just to open up the discussion point. As I thought about and looking at, and first of all, I want to compliment you in taking all of our input and structuring it around your mind. I think that was a difficult challenge for you. But as I looked at these, several questions came to my mind in terms of thinking through how do we prioritize. And so several questions I just want to raise with you. I assume that some of these things you're already working on. And I think that would be helpful for us to know that we don't want to make up something a low priority. If you're already engaged in working on those, that would probably be a high priority. Because we're invested in staff time, maybe you're already down the road in working on this. Could you tell us on any of these that you're already working on some of these already?
Certainly. With working with the finance department, we are working on how to improve our procedures, our processes for work accounting. It is an important item. I mean, as we've noted several times, we've noted that our lack of data, our lack of consistent data potentially costs us $2 million a year in possible revenue. So that is a high priority item for us, and staff are working on with the finance department to help improve that as we speak.
And which, so that's
number one.
Okay.
In number two, CityWorks is an application or is a program that we have begun to implement within the not only within IPL but citywide. It has a lot of moving pieces to it, so that's one that we are in the process of implementing. We have dedicated staff not only within the city but within IPL as well that are working on developing those applications and helping to get the most benefit we can out of it. Again, that's an ongoing priority because we have to train, not only do we have to develop the applications, but we have to train the staff on how to use them, train all of our workers on how to provide the data that will make CityWorks as useful as possible. And then we also have to, additionally, once we have that data flowing, we have to develop applications that we can use to pull that data in for example, for budgeting purposes, for planning our capital improvements. Looking at, for example, the tree trimming issue, identifying which circuits are causing us the most problems that are related to tree contacts. Which circuits have the most maintenance right now that we can target for an undergrounding. CityWorks will help us do that, but we've got a lot of work to do to get it to that point. So that's one that's in process, but does have ways to go. The IBEW work agreement, number 3, we've got a signed copy of the new agreement. I have asked the staff to go through that and to identify areas in their particular areas where either the work rules are inefficient, the work rules are out of date, or there's other problems that we can improve to make our operation more effective, more efficient. That negotiation will not start until probably sometime after the first year. And I'll be working with that, as we go forward on that.
And that was in the consultant report, as I remember.
Yes, that, in fact, that was both DKT and Martin Ferry both identified that that's an area that we need to put some effort into.
That was in the high priority.
Yes. The staff is already aware of it, and the staff is on their own, are going through the existing agreement to identify possible improvements. We'll have to collect those, prioritize them, and then, obviously work with IPPW to iron out the differences. Number 4, the future generation resources. Obviously, this is one that's important to all of us because it has such a large impact on the direction that our operation is going to go. We are requesting, as much as we can do without engaging consultants, we are reaching out to groups like the APPA, American Public Power Association, Missouri Public Utility Alliance, some of our neighbors that have already engaged in some of these construction projects, and just trying to gather what data we can, again, to help us when we do decide to reach out to put some kind of a proposal together. We'll have some of the background data already. But, that's one that we can't afford to delay long because we have the clock is ticking on the 5 to 10 year window that our combustion turbines are available, as well as the 10-year agreement that we have with Onetta. And before we get too far down the road, we'll have to have something moving to figure out what our replacement plan is.
So can you tell us a little bit more in terms of, we can't delay it too long, I understand that. But in terms of timing, can you tell us a little bit more in terms of timing? When we have 6 months, a year, 2 years, what are you projecting in terms of what we really have to?
Depending on which route we take, whether we go in-house with new generation that we own, or whether we look for new projects that we can partner with, or whether we stick with capacity purchase agreements from outside of independents, that will have a large impact on what the timeline is. If we decide that the way to go is for in-house generation to replace combustion turbines, that's a multi-year process. It's going to take some time to develop what the new generation resource is going to be. You have the timing is going to be important for applying for permits. We do have some existing permits, but updating those and possibly, depending on the scenario, if we need additional permits for an operation, those it can take all year long to prepare the application and get that approved and get through the process. The construction itself can take a couple of years. It could be as much as a 5-year program to get generation actually where it's ready to produce. So we're 2 years into our 5-year or 5 to 10 year window now. So if that's the direction if we decide that what we need is to continue with purchase power and capacity agreements, then before the 10-year agreement with Onetta expires, we just have to be ready to move on what we would do to replace that. So a lot of the answer to that depends on which direction we recommend.
May I ask, how do you go about making that determination? And that requires a sophisticated actuarial analysis. You guided, how is that done?
We'll have to look at what we think is what are the pros and cons of the different scenarios. What's the benefit to having our own in-house generation? What's the benefit to going the cheap route and continue with, say, capacity agreements? We'll have to have some forecasts. As a lot of these older plants retire, the amount of excess capacity available on the market is going to decrease, which means the cost for that capacity is going to go up. Pretty much guaranteed nothing's going to get cheaper. So we have to look at what are the forecasts, what are the actuaries say is likely to happen with those capacity costs. If there are purchase power agreements available, we could, like we have with Nebraska City and I-10. What are the likely costs of those going forward? Those are all some forecasts that we have to get to help cities and counties.
So we have a consultant report that addressed that issue. We have that report in hand. Do you anticipate that in reviewing that report and updating it, that will be a staff review, or do you anticipate that will bring in other consultants to review?
We can take that report and work, discuss as with this board and with staff, we can discuss what the pros and cons are. I don't think the relative costs aren't going to shift a lot, I would think, not in the short term. But you really have to have a discussion about value. What is the value of having in-house generation? What's the value of participating in purchase power agreements or ownership agreements like Dogwood? What does that bring to the table besides just the dollar spent? There's reliability factors, there's the impact on outages, stability of the system, there's the different scenarios have different revenue opportunities. So there's more than just the dollar cost, and all of that will be important in that decision. Once we have a better idea of which direction we think we want to go, we can go out and get some better estimates for specific technology that would help us to fine-tune that decision.
And some of the items on here are not negotiable, like succession plan. We could choose to make that low priority, and it really doesn't matter. As you actually can age out the time, if we're going to require a replacement anyway. So I struggle a little bit with the process for how I pick my favorites, as opposed to figuring out which ones are required, which ones are optional, and which ones are decisions that involve stocks. Because some of these are decisions that are entirely up to the management of IPL. So I hope that as we go through, you'll be sure to give us input on, some of these really have to happen regardless.
Sure. As far as the succession planning goes, we do have several positions that the incumbents are aging out. Our meter shop, the meter shop foreman and both technicians could go any day that decide they want to go. Our substation crew, I think half of our substation crew is eligible to retire as we speak, including the supervisor. So our system operators, the folks that 24/7 run our distribution system, out of the 5, I believe 3 of them are eligible to retire. The training is the issue, or part of the issue. How do we get somebody in time to start the training? If we don't have a position in our table of organization that's funded for us to hire. In most cases, we hire somebody to replace somebody as they leave. We begin the process either immediately prior or just after the person is actually gone. For some of these positions, that will put us in a bind. So we have to look at and we have to work with our HR and finance staff to figure out how do we do that? How do we manage that process so that we can get the right people or provide for a training pipeline to have them ready and eliminate some of those gaps.
And most large companies have a line item in their personnel that says transition planning, and that allows them that overlap period where they have 2 people who have the same job title during that training phase. So I'm sure they recognize that it's not without cost, but the complications of addressing that are prevent the whole cost you part of the
Sure. Well, and for example, the system operators, the training for that system operator takes about a year. So if we hire somebody that does not have already have the certification, it's gonna take about a year to possibly a year and a half to where they can actually be certified and do the job unsupervised. That's a long time to double up a position. But like I said, that's something that we'll have to work with HR and finance to figure out how the best way to accomplish that.
Jim,
Yes.
I don't know the new members don't have it, but some of the older members on this board, on the CTs, my first meeting here was about CTs. I didn't know what you were talking about. But good Lord, we talked about them every meeting after that. We've done nothing to them. We had Burns and Donald come in, and we paid them a stupid amount of money to tell us what needed to be done with them. So here we are doing it again. What I'm saying is, if you check back in the notes, they'll tell you what needs to be done. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that right, Mark?
Well, Burns McDonald gave us a list of options. We could replace the combustion turbines, we could continue to maintain them at ever increasing maintenance costs. We could replace them with newer, more efficient technology. We could, or as they laid out in their report, we could stick with, or we could go a shift to capacity arrangements, purchase power agreements. They laid out the options, they laid out the costs for those. They did not make a recommendation of which one they thought was the best. They just laid it out as in terms of what's the cheapest to the most expensive.
Well, what I'm getting at is, they laid out that, and we as a board, I remember voting that we needed to get rid of them. The ones that were high maintenance, high repair. Yet we've done nothing, and here we are addressing them again. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. This is a Public Utilities Advisory Board. But every time we come to a meeting, it turns out to be an IPL board. Because that's apparently the only thing we care about. But we put everything off. We said, okay, we'll take that under advisement. And next thing you know, we're on something else. I want some finalization saying we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and that's it. And that's what needs to be done. Because if we're going to stay here, we might as well come up with a new board for the IPL, and then another board for water and water pollution control. Well, what is it now? The Public Works.
I assure you, I have a sense of urgency about this generation issue, and Councilman Huff has made comments several times that over the years, this has been a can that's got kicked down the road time after time after time. Now we're to the point where we've got to make a decision, and we've got to move forward with whatever plan the city decides to adopt. I will certainly work with you to help shape that recommendation. But there are, it is a serious question that has a lot of implications both for the reliability of our system as well as the costs.
And that's what I'm saying. We've made decisions on, we had another Burns and Brown come in and told us, no, you're gonna have to raise your rates to 17 or 13% or something, outrageous figure. And then, our city people come up with, we could reduce it by 6%. And exactly 2 months after they told us we had to raise it, Burns McDonald says, oh yeah, you can lower it.
Burns McDonald's original.
And then they said, no, you don't want to do it right. Yeah, you do it. Because it's like I said at that meeting, if you don't try something different, you're not going to get a different result. And we need a different result because we're losing money on the CTs as far as I'm concerned. Every time you have, how many, 17 people to run one? 6, I mean. That's a good job. Anyway, that's my concern is I think we need to get something done as soon as possible.
I understand. And Burns McDonald, I mean, everyone needs to understand when Bruce McDonald came in to do that study and made that recommendation, it was based on the scenario we gave them. And essentially, if nothing changes, if power and light continues as it is right now, and nothing changes, here's the impact to your revenue. We all see the declining revenues and increasing costs, and in order to accommodate that, you would have to have a rate increase.
Well, it was prior to your taking over the power and light. But what I'm saying is, yeah, that's exactly what you did. Bruce McDonald said, yeah, this is what we want. And they did what you wanted. They did what management wanted. They didn't do anything to help the customer. They didn't say, well, this is what the public utility advisory board wants. This is what the city staff wants. Well, we as a board, we don't want that anymore. We want what we wanted for the public, for the ratepayer and all the utilities out here.
Under number 5, several members of the board have asked a number of times about potential rate reductions. What I put into this for your consideration is, and it's the next to the last bullet on number 5, is to provide for an annual review to evaluate the potential for excess funds and the most appropriate means to benefit the ratepayers. And the reason I phrase it that way is the right answer this year might be, or next year might be a rate change, or it might be a rebate. If we have a particularly good year, that doesn't mean the rate's wrong. It's some other factor, whether that's fuel costs were down, our revenue, we had unexpected opportunities to collect revenue. For whatever reason, a year might be a good year. The next year might be the opposite. So if we evaluate it on a year-to-year basis, if we think we have an appropriate rate for our way we're set up, then let the rate stabilize. We can plan out 3, 4, 5 years, continue to make our revenue projections, base our budget off of those revenue projections. And then if we do have a good year, possibility would be that we look and say that, based on all of our financial analysis, we've got $10 million above and beyond what we need for our cash reserves. The decision might be that instead of tweaking rate for that one good year, maybe the answer is you issue a rebate to the customers and return, because what the charter says to return the excess to the ratepayers. It doesn't say change rates, it says return the excess. And the best, from year to year, the best answer might be a rebate. So instead of having a goal of specifically targeting the rate itself, maybe I propose that the answer might be look at how we can best serve the ratepayers from year to year. And it's going to change from year to year.
Mr. Chairman, I want to say thank you for your comments just now. I don't know in all of the history of IPL, how many times IPL has actually either reduced rates or given back to the ratepayers. And that's where I think we find ourselves in a situation where our rates are so high that our city manager in public meeting can say, we're not going to adjust rates for 5 years. We're not going to have to raise rates for 5 years. Well, in reality, if it was being properly budgeted and properly handled, we'd be looking at it on an annual basis. And yes, some years we would be given a rebate. Some years we may have to actually increase rates. But the way we've done it now, or done it for, actually, I forget when we had those 3 big rate increases, how many years ago?
I think it was between 2009 and 2012. 2012 was the last one.
The idea of following the charter and giving back to the ratepayers has been non-existent. And I think we all know it. And I think part of the issue is we built budgets. So what we need or what we want, and then whatever that is, plus making sure we have a pilot, then that's where the rates fall.
we're doing it backwards. And I hope that, one of the priorities that I put in there is kind of different from what you're saying, but I do applaud you for that. Do we know when we're gonna get that cash, Adam, when we're gonna get that cash report on how we're doing on reserves and what is available to give back to the ratepayers?
PFM is scheduled to brief you all next Thursday.
Who?
Our advisor, our financial advisor, PFM, is scheduled to present this to you. They came and presented to this board, I forget when that was, a few months ago.
Yeah, you
They're
gave
scheduled to come back.
encouraging news the other day, so.
Yeah, so they're scheduled to come back on Thursday, next Thursday at your regular meeting.
Okay.
Presentation.
And the other thing that, I don't know how we're gonna do this, but I think we're getting, bogged down in the weeds or the grass or whatever you want to call it. I think that at some point we need to try and score these so that we have a better idea. And if we want to use, I was talking to Garland before the meeting, and I think Garland's spreadsheet makes good sense. I think, in addition to what Jim has put together, I also submitted one basically taking what Jim put together and took several things off. My list ended up with 6 issues versus 9, and I expanded on some of the things that I thought was important, and if people score and they don't think it's important, that's fine too. But I think us going through each one and laying it out for what we're going to do in 5 years and what have you, I think we're going to be here till midnight.
Well, Mr. Lang has asked for an explanation of which ones we were working on, so I was just trying to give
Yeah.
a picture of that.
And I applaud you that we need to be working on it. And I think the doctor's comments earlier, I thought were very well put. I would move that as soon as we get done with IPL on their budget, on their prioritization, we need to do the same thing for WPC, and we need to do the same thing for the water department. We don't have that continuity, and I think we as a board have been spoon-fed or whatever, but we need to be much more active in the policy making or advisement to the city council. So next week we'll know what that amount of money is, and then maybe we can advise the city council, maybe providing some kind of relief to the ratepayers, which is wonderful. But anyway, that's my suggestion, that we do something to be able to score this thing out, because even though you going through it, it's very enlightening and very entertaining. I think we need to get off ground zero.
And the rest of those items are things that we've discussed with staff. We don't really have anything yet in place to address them, but I've told the staff that these are areas that we need to be better in, as far as the data-driven maintenance decisions, data-driven capital improvement decisions. Excellent recommendation that Jack provided for looking at reduced tree trimming by moving more circuits underground, and doing that based on our storm data, maintenance data. Certainly that's an area that we can work on, and we're just now beginning the budget process for next year. That's one of the goals I've given our T&D and tree trimming group, is to look at that, see what information we have, and we use that. It really just requires using the resources we've got, like CityWorks. CityWorks will have, assuming the data has been put in, CityWorks, you can search CityWorks and find out how many storm-related outages did we have. How many of those were because of tree contacts? How many parts of town, we have like a 5-year trimming cycle to go around and keep everything in order. What areas do we have to go back more often? What areas are growing faster than what our trim cycle accounts for? And are those areas that would be appropriate to target? Do we have parts of town that are already partially underground that we could finish the process? All of that is data we can use CityWorks to help us review and then take a look at what those costs are and put appropriate amounts in both our operating budget and our capital improvement budget. Unless you have any questions about any specific items, that would give you a picture of what we've already started working on and kind of what our thought process is.
Jim, again, applaud you and Adam both for the hard work you put in on this and listening to us. We appreciate it. We still have, as you know, concerns. We'll address them. I'm sure we will. Is there any other comments from the committee?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Chair for me here.
Yeah, okay.
I have a question regarding the listing of objectives under number 8.
Okay.
Both our group and the council have struggled for quite some time now regarding the responsibilities of the city charter and the Bondurant decision. And those are bulleted there, third bullet down in number 8. I believe the city charter is fairly clear. But both groups obviously have a different view of what the Bondurant decision says and is supposed to mean. I'm just wondering, I'm asking the city what path we would take to get clarity on the Bondurant decision.
Sure, I think that's a question for you.
I think that question definitely came up earlier this spring, maybe last fall, and the city attorney was going to provide that for you guys. And I can definitely check with her on where that is. You know, everything kind of fell apart in February, so things kind of got pushed aside a little bit. So
Would that be up to you to do, or do you want me to call her?
I have to. So I can ask.
I'd like to interject a thought here. Both parties seem to have differing opinions on the Bondurant decision. When one party has the attorney making the decision, I would much rather see an independent making that decision rather than a representative from one of the groups that don't agree.
I think that if we're going to, I agree that that's a constant problem. And in defining the answer to that, I think that we ought to phrase the questions that ought to be answered very specifically. I don't think we ought to just say we want a lawyer to address the Bondurant decision and without addressing specific questions. I think we have enough real life questions that have come up that as a PUAB, we ought to come up with very specific questions that we ought to ask a lawyer to address. Otherwise, we may not come back with a satisfactory review of what we're wanting.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
just my 2 cents on it, because Jack didn't get, I don't think Jack got a copy of what I said. My first priority, the top priority, is to officially address the operating relationship between Independence Fire and Light and the city of Independence, Missouri, specifically the March 12, 1980 Bondurant decision and the city of Independence city charter. Our city deserves the transparency and integrity of resolving this point of contention. And I totally agree with Jack. I think it needs to be to an arbitrator or another judge or someone without having to sue the city, which I think is sad that someone said that we have to sue the city in order to get a clarification on that. And I also think the question is, is the Bondurant decision a valid document or is it not? It's not, let me ask you a scenario and I have a question on it. Is the Bondurant decision accurate? As written? And or is it outdated and it doesn't make any sense to me? I don't know how a judgment goes away. That's just my point. Does that help you after all?
It does. I agree with both of the speakers here on that. I realize the city's in a tough position. You know, the remaining conflict has been the street light. And there's some others, but none as significant as that. I know the city will struggle with expenses and will hold steadfast into not wanting to pay for those expenses. I can understand that. But if the Bondurant decision is the way that the board sees it, there needs to be a comfortable way for the city to approach the street lighting costs.
Adam?
Yes, sir, thank you. I agree that this court case and varying interpretations of the city charter, in my short time involved with the utilities here in this board, it is something that comes up quite frequently. What I would suggest as far as that specific process goes, that becomes one of the higher priorities once this all shakes out and that gets presented to this board. Then we would work with you all on what that process looks like to determine what that case means, what is involved in that, the charter and all those things. So I think if it becomes a priority, which my guess is it likely would be one of the higher priorities, then we would work with you all on what that process looks like, what all that entails, the questions that need to be asked, that type of thing. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Jack, are you through for a minute?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
I've discussed this with a lot of people, the Bondurant decision. I'm looking at the city charter, which I got a copy right here if you want to read it. I see it's a court decision. There's been no appeal to it. Nobody's reversed it or anything. But instead of reading the Bondurant decision, we read the city charter. We go up to another section that says, well, it says here you can loan money to another entity in the city if you pay it back in the next fiscal year. Well, I don't, the last one was I got two councilmen sitting there, was 2.5 million that they took out of the Power and Light Fund. 25 million? They authorized it. It's what they haven't used it. They gave some, that they used the money for the federal government for the CSL, is that right? So we haven't touched it. But there's been other times that there's been money that the cars that we bought, how many, 7? I don't know how many of them have been paid for yet, but yet we see it every time on our financial report in lieu of taxes. Well, it's not lieu in taxes, we tax it anyway. And I don't see any change in that amount of money ever. We're not paid anything off on it. Is it a lease program? Are we going into the car leasing program or something? I don't know. But to me, it's the way we interpret the city charter as opposed to interpreting the Bondurant decision. The Bondurant decision is very clear. It's simple as that. But the city charter is not that clear. It doesn't say enterprise funds cannot do this. It says that if you do this, that any our power line or public works or any of them loan money to them, you have to pay it back. It has to be distinguished in the city charter. But I still would like to, with the rest of them, have it final note on it and get it out of the way from an outside source, and the priority, Adam, like you said, we'll start the groundwork and get it done. Get somebody in here to tell us what needs to be done with the charter or the bond route decision. And that's my opinion on it at this time. Jack, do you have anything else on that?
Well, just be careful how deep we get into it. I agree with everything you said. The Bondurant decision, though, has wording in there that says anything that is not part of providing electricity to the residents of Independence is inappropriate to use for anything else other than power line uses. That's,
Yeah, that's what I'm
I don't
saying.
know how you can interpret that any other way.
And that's what I'm saying. The bond route decision is very clear. But then we have our staff, some of our staff, and some of our names interpreted a different way.
Well, it's important
From
to,
the.
that's a lot of money.
Huh?
I said it's important because it's a lot of money. But if we're looking on the efficiency of the utility, it must be approached.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm still concerned how we're gonna set priorities. Everything that I've heard is everything's a high priority. And I appreciate that. Everything on this list is very important. And I don't know how we whittle this down to saying some things are less important than others. I mean, some of it is in terms of timing of how, when do you address something sooner than something else? I think everything on this list is good and is important. I don't think, you know, we all provide our input and you had your input. I don't think there's anything we'll say is unimportant. But I'm really struggling with how do we say that is this to be a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan? Do we have any direction from what do you envision, Jim, in terms of how you see this as a plan?
I would say this gives the IPL staff direction for a good 3 to 5 years. Some of the stuff is going to happen faster than that. Some of the items are more of a long-term process, but I think it gives us good direction that we can use to make some of those longer-term decisions. I can tell you that regardless of the priorities, different IPL staff members will be addressing these things. The question comes down to, if it comes down to a question of time and resources, we would shift those to the higher priority items. But that doesn't mean the other items will be forgotten. We'll focus first on ones of the highest priority.
So I guess is it important for you that we set the priorities? Or is it more important that we direct you back to set a timeline for each one of these as a staff? That you provide a timeline for each one of these, and you bring back to us the timeline for our review. I mean, I think that would be a more helpful process, that we review your recommendation to us as a timeline. And if we think there ought to be an adjustment to that timeline for any one of these, then we can have that discussion. But I'm challenged to set a priority. I think this is more important than that. Because I think they're all important, but I think you know which one of these things you're already working on. And because some things you're working on now, but it may take 2 years. Some of these things you're working on now, but you're going to get done in 2 months' time. But if you would tell us, this one we're going to start on this date, and we expect to have it done by this date, that would be helpful for us to see.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
the other thing that I think would be helpful is if you think of that as your timeline spreadsheets of various activities, are there ones that require particular resources? So legal opinion, financial infusion, new line item in the budget, those resources that would be required, I think, will also help us to be able to figure out how we support you in that work.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I don't know how many of you had a chance to review working environments recommendations. I know we're talking about IPL's recommendations, and some of theirs are already in their works, they're working on it. But after comparing the two, there's no question that this is really well thought out, and if you haven't seen it, you need to take a look at it. Even though you're working on some of your items already, the clarification on the governance is number one. And that needs to be addressed. It's something that, I've only been here for a couple months, but it seems like we're just dancing around it and not addressing it. And I don't care who has to make the decision. It needs to be an independent party. But it needs to be addressed. Because it seems that is our biggest problem. Now, the other items for the future, yes. Policies, yes. But this, we shouldn't dance around this anymore. And Martha's was beautiful, but we all haven't read it, we need to read through it. In fact, would it be out of order for Mark to read this so it's in the record?
Christine will give a copy of it.
Can you say that again?
Huh?
I can't hear you. Can you say that again?
Do you have a copy of this yet?
Yes.
All right, it's in the record.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Jack Rooney here.
Yes, sir.
I like the idea of having a checklist of objectives and costs and those type of things as was recommended earlier by one of our board members. I can't help but think that there's a number of things that might determine priority. I'm going to suggest that one thing is items that make the most financial impact as immediately as possible. For instance, as you know, I'm a proponent of the underground program, but the tree trimming cost is one of the higher costs of the power light budget each year. I think that causes that, and I think it's afoot already, but I think that causes that to come to the upper end of the list. And anything else that might have a large financial impact, I think deserves immediate attention. The other thing I caution against, and again, it's speculation, but when we talk about our future generation, with administration at its highest level perhaps changing to a more green attitude, we've got to be very careful what considerations we make towards future generations. It may be that our decisions might not be compliant with the thoughts of the future leaders. I'll conclude with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Well, I don't want to sit here and let everybody advertise what they want. I'd like to have that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
going back to Mark's list here, number 3, should be probably right behind number 1. Develop a systematic approach of cost reduction. Comparison of salaries. I mean, I look at this and as an outsider, I'm thinking, are we paying too much since we're the second highest utility within 50 miles of this location? There's a problem there. We're doing something definitely wrong. Comparison of salaries and benefits for the employees and managers, for similar type utilities. These are things that need to be addressed. I mean, and as far as I'm concerned, push them up as high as you can. I like the idea that Mr. Garland is going to do as far as rating these. I think we ought to both winners. Put them out to all of us and let us rate these and bring it back. And we should be able to do that in a week's time before our next meeting. I mean, if nobody at the city staff wants to do it, I'll be more than happy to sit down and put it in a computer and create a spreadsheet and send it out to everybody. But there's no excuse to push this off any farther.
That's exactly what I was gonna say, David. I was gonna say that we don't need to be discussing our priorities today. We need to go to a list and prioritize them, rate them the way we want, and bring it back to our regular meeting on the 19th. Is that everybody's thought? I hope.
Did we make a motion to that effect?
Yes.
So moved. I said,
Motion been made to make a priority list. Is there any, David, do you want to make a score sheet?
I'll be more than happy to take Mr. Knoll's list, Mr. Garland's list, Mr. McDonald's list. I put them into a spreadsheet and send it out to everybody. Or I'll send it to you. I know the meetings will. I'll send it to you and you can send it out. You can clean it up if I've made mistakes. I'll do my best to have it to you by Saturday or Sunday. So we can make sure everybody has it over the weekend.
Okay?
Will that work? Yep. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I appreciate the offer, Mr. McDowell, but I certainly believe we're more capable of doing that, and it seems appropriate that whatever scoring sheet needs to be developed, we can do that and get that to the board. If everyone's comfortable with that, but we need the criteria that you want to use. And in my mind, when we put this list together, and it's not clear to me which list we're actually using right now. But what I was assuming was something like each board member in a typical strategic planning process, you get 3 or 4 points. And you assign those points to each one of these areas. You can assign all your points in one area if that's a priority for you. You assign 2, you assign whatever you want. And then we bring that back to you all. That was what I envisioned, but certainly this is your process here. We're here to support you through that process.
I'd rather the city would have David.
I don't have a problem with that. You've got 3 sheets right here from 3 different people. Just put them in a spreadsheet and send them out. Have 4 boxes where we can rate them 1 through 4.
So what I would
1 through 3, I'm sorry.
One's just one's copy, a mechanism guide for how to rate, and the other 2 are documents.
Okay, just 2 documents. I think for
Just 2 documents, yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Dan. Adam,
Chaplain,
Jack,
would it be possible for the city to attach potentially achievable savings from each one of these categories that are being proposed?
I don't
not by tomorrow. If we want to get the spreadsheet out, and
Let's
it's
just
just
stick with the.
I think that's important in the decision making now, sir.
Well, we've been on the board and we've got a lot of information I got that shows me the savings and the spending. I think we can refer to our own file. I got a whole cabinet full of papers that tell me how much we've lost and how much we've gained and how much we. They don't have me on there anyplace. I mean, go ahead.
just to help Jen, for me and Jen to understand each other. I don't think it's possible to put a value on something. Some of the things I totally agree, like the tree trimming thing you were talking about. Some of these things, I don't know that you can just off the top come up with a value to associate with it, whether it be your work with IDW. I don't think it would be, when we're looking at systematic rate study, I don't think any of those things would have values. It had benefits later on, but I don't know how you could put them, listing and say, this would be the highest impact economically, and then on down the list. So I don't know that that would be appropriate.
So thinking on the fly here a little bit, okay? Two things. I think we have a few lists here. If this board is gonna evaluate priorities, we need to reconcile these.
Because I see there's overlap.
There is overlap. So if we merge these two documents together, and quite honestly, I mean, we attempted to do that to the extent we did, but maybe we didn't fully hit those objectives here. So what I would suggest is, first, we use one of these lists, and, my suggestion maybe start with what was in your packet. And if there's something that needs to be moved over to this list, then we do that. Or if something needs to come off this list, we do that too. Language needs to change. And then we will send this list out. And you will all prioritize this. If we, as a document as a whole, if this is fully endorsed by the board as a whole, all these items are things that want to be pursued, then the entire document can be endorsed and recommended to the city council. But we would place a higher priority on those items that were top three, for instance. But all of those things, we don't want that good work to get lost. I mean, we spend time with you all, you took time out of your day to meet with us. We don't want that work to get lost. So if, as a whole, if the plan is supported by you all, reflects what this board wants to see done, and you can endorse the entire plan, and then we'll just focus initially at least on those three priorities. So much like what we did when I first came on the team here, we will work those other items if they're endorsed by the board and the city council in tangent. At the same time, these other things are going on. We would just focus more time and energy and resources on those things that are pressing. Does that make sense?
So, because I'm not clear if we're prioritizing the 9 or if we're prioritizing the 41.
So the idea would be to prioritize the 9, or whatever the final list is, but not the 41. That would kind of water things down. That's my recommendation to you all, okay? That's your choice, though. That would be my recommendation.
I think Mark's ideas are incorporated in the 9. I don't think we have to, I didn't have time to actually review Mark's document with yourself this morning, or this afternoon. And you can review it more carefully, Mark, and see if there's something that didn't get into the 9. And you can probably tell them if something's missing. But my guess is that the 9 encompasses everything that Mark has on this list. So if that your recommendation is that we're prioritizing the 9, which simplifies our process as opposed to all 41 dot points.
I would recommend you prioritize whatever list this board endorses, okay? So we came up with a list of 9 things. They're not numbered in order of priority for us. That's just how they were done. If there's something on this list that we missed, the mission renewals list, that we missed, it's not in here, then I would suggest we reconcile that now, okay? And then we send this, whatever list we come up with here, out to the board. You all have, so, we give you a spreadsheet, we give you 3 or 4 points, prioritize, what you want out of here. We score that and bring it back to you all next week. And then you can endorse the entire plan in theory, and we would know what the top ranking priorities are. So if there are items here, Mr. McDonald, that need to be incorporated here, and I would recommend we work through that right now, and then we have a plan and priorities that this board can then assess and come back and make a recommendation next week.
May I ask, Mr. McDonald, was your intent to do it in order of what you thought was most important? Or some of your wording was more pointed on yours than on the city's version? So I just am trying to understand the priorities that you put forward. What was your intent?
Let me explain what mine is. Mine is basically taking the memo and incorporating what I believe to be the more important issue. There's several things that I think should be handled at the local level, whether it be you'll see, and you probably need to see both of them. One is about negotiation. Another one is about the clarifying governance. Clarifying governance, I just put is number one, is the most important to me. And I clarified which issue needed to be addressed. I believe that this really put the emphasis was not there. It wasn't to the level that the Bondurant versus the city charter importance was. And I did that for all issues. One thing that's really missing in this document is any real discussion about rate setting. For some reason, I know I submitted something that said something very specifically about rate setting. And this final product of 9, I think it was listed, you've already, it's in bullet point, next to the last bullet point under 5, it says provide the annual reviews to evaluate potential of excess funds and the most appropriate. It's in there, but it doesn't have near the level of significance that I think I would hope our board would be trying to highlight. And I don't agree that we should be giving them a laundry list of 70 items or like the strategic plan for the city. You know, that's just a huge enumeration so that we can say we got a lot of stuff done. I think it's more important that they handle a few things and then get that taken care of, and then we do the process again to see if there's problems with what we've done. Cost reduction thing, I can assure you mine was, I expanded on what the city had, Mr. Nails had put together. There was a real emphasis to go on one particular employee type, which about, I'm missing it in my head. It was talking about complaints. Oh, here it is. It's very clear that number 6 is related to the question of AMI and whether we should have AMI or not. I can care less whether we have AMI or we don't have AMI. But there's far more issues from what we've seen in the Public Area Report and the DKMT report that would say that all employee types need to be looked at, whether it's not just the meter readers. We need to be looking at management levels. We need to be looking at for the whole thing. So what I did on that one was actually expand on. So yeah, I went through each one of them and I said, does this make sense? Real high level enough that board government, which city council is for like the or for the utility, and we're advising them for what they should be looking at, or what we believe are the most critical things to look at. And that's what this thing is that I put together, is actually going through this, putting a priority list on it, and incorporating Jack's. Jack Looney's is number 6 on here, but that is exactly what was in this report. So some of the things didn't change at all. Some of them were eliminated because I thought that they were things that Mr. Neal is working on. And I don't know that that was important to be presenting to the city council as a priority. It's an everyday, and I don't welcome your job if you have it today, but that's something that he's working on. I think he's going to do fine. So that's how this document got created. Any other questions?
I don't have any questions. I just want to say that I would really like to see us, a lot of discussion. I'd like to see it simplified. All board members should have a copy of Mark's recommendations. Do you? All right. And then we all have a copy of the cities. I would like to have Adam make up a score sheet off of the original, this list, his list. And we could take that and then read these and score these. If we don't think this is important on their list, or it's already been done, just mark it off before scoring. And the other thing that we could bring up and score the ones that we think are important on Mark's list, on this list. We need to have more input. Is that understandable or not? I think it'd be simpler for them to make up one score sheet off of this sheet. And then us score it using your sheet and these together, looking at it and saying, well, that don't match. We won't do that. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes, it doesn't. Hit your button.
There's, maybe, I'm trying to interpret, I think it's unfortunate when we bring documents to the meeting that we haven't had a chance to review. And just having last meeting, having this meeting, and I think that's very unfortunate. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I think Mark has tried to wordsmith the other document to clarify what he views needs to be emphasized. I don't think that there's a conflict in the two documents. I think it's a matter of wording. I think the concepts are embedded in both documents. It's just Mark is trying to clarify with more language, whereas the first document is one sentence where Mark has made a paragraph. But I don't sense that and we can make a paragraph for a lot of more of all the dot points if we wanted to. I don't know how we mesh the two together, Mark. Unless you think that there's something that is actually missing in the, apparently you feel that there's something missing in concept in the original document. Is that your concern?
Yes, right. Great setting process. It's hidden under number 8 in the 5th bullet under number 8.
Okay, it's there, but you don't think is it, you think it's there, but it's just not defined the way you want it defined?
Just like the ponderant. Ponderant is.
No, let's not get off.
Same thing. Look at where they put the ponderant. It's under, it's number 8.
It's simply the order that they're in. And if you read Mark, and if you don't agree with it, you think it's fine, then you approve, rate the other one. But we only need one sheet to score, I think. Use marks for us to help score. If you agree that this ought to be higher, like these are the on-route decision and government thing, number 1, you agree, then give it a 4 or a 5 or whatever it is on your score sheet.
It seems isn't in order. Tim didn't intend to have 8 to be the priority. Tim's sheet didn't intend to be in priority order. 8 isn't intended to be the priority.
Priorities up to you.
Priorities up to us. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. We go off this original sheet, we used marks to help us do.
For clarification, could we rank them 1 through 9? That way we put the ones that we think are the least at 9, the ones we think are the highest priorities at 1, and make sure, perhaps it's 1 through 10, and rate setting is one of those within that. Would that allow us to at least proceed? Because the 3 dots and 4 dots is going to be really tough since people are looking at a variety of things.
I thought that was what the score sheet would be. We make the priority towards up and bring us to our meeting on the 19th.
I worry about trying to, each one of y'all prioritizing this list separately, 1 through 9, and then we have to detect it. And it may be possible, I'm just trying to put this in my head, how this would work. So it would be, the priority or the item here that was ranked number 1 the most is the highest priority, and the one that the second priority will be, I'm suggesting we give you 4 or 5 points, or 3 to 5 points, and you assign a number. You want to assign, for instance, Mark may want to assign 3 of his 4 points to the governance and reporting process. So then that would automatically have 3 or 4 points, and then if someone else has 2 of that, they may end up with 20 points, and the next item may have 15 points.
Well, in the same respect, some of them are going to have the same amount of points. I mean, you don't come up with a priority list, but some of them, as we all know on here, are already being done, so they're not really on the list.
And I just want to make sure that everybody knows this is a P-rate meeting process. This really isn't the city staff process or IPL process. With all due respect, I do appreciate the work that has been done, but the emphasis on the particular items is missing. And if you can incorporate my level of significance for the monitoring case and the developing a rate setting and cost reduction, I'm great with it. But the way it is in current form right now is not acceptable for me.
It's on the list, but it's not. Help have it.
All right. What I would suggest, sir, is let's start with the rate setting, okay? So if you would, just my suggestion here, your process, right? And again, I'm just here to provide a suggestion, okay? I'm not, my intent here, and neither is Jim's, is to, practice. We're supporting here. So, are you suggesting we add a bullet in number 5 to say rate setting process, or do you want to add something? Maybe I would suggest you propose additional language to this document to capture what you want.
I did.
Okay,
This is the language I want in there for rate setting, the language I want in there for the clarifying governance and reporting processes. Maybe we should just take a vote. Is this what we want to do, or is it not what we want to do? Because I think this is very simple.
Are you saying that we don't do this?
We do whatever we want to do.
No, are you recommending that we only go with your?
Yeah.
Point of order, we have a motion on the floor and second. I either need to have a vote or remove the motion. David?
Well, I believe originally you were going to make a spreadsheet.
I'm gonna pull that motion. Can you sign it?
Yeah.
You want to pull it? Yes. All right, let's go.
All right, now, would you like to make a new motion, Art? Did you want to make a motion? And what you said, you just want to go?
I don't know what we want to do as a group, because it's clear, this was not a document. This is something that, in all due respect, that Mr. Nail took and paraphrased what was submitted. And issued it, and I mentioned it at our meeting. I mentioned at our meeting the other day, that bond wasn't even included until the meeting the other day. And I read what you sent out to us, and I said, the significance of each one of those needs to be increased. And I see, for me, these are the priorities for advising the city council on what needs to be worked on at IPL. So that's basically where I'm at. Some of the things that were in your paraphrasing, I left in there. You saw that. But on it's got to get taken care of, and we've been dinking around with it for way too long.
I guess what I hear Mark proposing is he has presented the priorities, and he's asking us to accept his priorities. I thought we were here as a group to develop the priorities. And I thought the purpose of this meeting was for a group process to develop the priorities, as opposed to one member developing the priorities for us to agree to. So I'm confused why we are going to change the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we accept what I submitted for the priorities for this project.
Motion been made and seconded. Any more discussion?
I'd like to speak against that because the other people who recommended prior items are not included in Mark's priorities. We all had opportunity to submit ideas for priorities. Mark chose not to include my ideas and other people's ideas. He only included his own ideas. I think that's very unfortunate for this committee to only accept the ideas of one individual and ignore everybody else's ideas. I think the process that we agreed to last time was that IPL would take all of the ideas, both from IPL and from all the ideas submitted by each individual, and incorporate those into a single document. And then we as a group would develop the priorities. That's what we have been trying to work through as a group today. The motion on the table is to do just the opposite of what we have been here for the last hour and a half. That is subjugating what we have been, the purpose of this meeting. That is not what this meeting was called to do. That's not the agenda of this meeting. I think it's out of order. So I call for this motion to be out of order.
Is it out of order, sir?
I don't think that's a motion. So, we have a motion on the floor, it's been seconded. I think that the board is going to address which priority was in the vote.
Since we're still talking about the motion, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
you can see a lot of the city's ideas in Mark's list. However, Mark's list is more in line with my thinking. And if there's something on there that Mr. Land would like to add to that list, I think that would be a great time to do it. But I for one, I like this. I think this is a good document, and it comes from us,
and lenders, I'm still going to support it.
For point of clarification,
Go ahead.
is there the opportunity to take Mr. McDonald's priorities, but I still feel like I didn't get the time in advance of the meeting to really sit down and read it carefully like I would for the materials that I came prepared to discuss, which is the document, the shared document. So that's one concern I have. And I will go do my homework and read it carefully and make sure that I agree or disagree with language. Language matters, and I think we need to be thoughtful that that should be language that represents a variety of perspectives and not just a single. But if this was based on the document that we did as shared work, why would we not vote and rank the ones that we have that we did together? Perhaps we end up using the language that Mr. McDonald is applying for those after the ranking is done. That we get the best of both sets of thinking.
Any more discussion?
Additional comment, yes, Jack, I'm here.
Yeah.
Just trying to look at it from up, Mark, we all had an opportunity to do input, and that's shown in the 9 categories on the attachment to the agenda today. This kind of supports the last speaker's comments. Mark condensed and emphasized many that he thought were important, which was good. However, there are others that felt like it left out some things that they had related on the 9-item list. Now, I agree with taking the 9-item list, working it into priorities. The 1 through 9 listing is meaningless. It's just a different category. They're not priorities. So we could take all of our thoughts from that list and develop and rate them and develop a new priority list. That's it for me.
Thank you, Jack. Any other discussion?
The question was raised about what was missing from Mark's list. Number 1 is missing. Or is missing. I mean, that's one of the most important things that was mentioned earlier, that we lost $2.5 million because we didn't have first standards. That's missing from Mark's list. City Works is missing from Mark's list. That was mentioned earlier, that we were, from a management point of view, we're not using City Works. That's missing from Mark's list. The whole issue in terms of the IBEW is missing from Mark's list. I mean, you can go through all of this, and there's big gaps that are not in Mark's list. So I think we need to realize that if we're going to with Mark's list, a lot of content that was being recommended by individuals on this PUB is being left out. All of the recommendations were made by PUB members are being left out.
Bridget?
Yeah, I think actually some of those things were on your list. They're just, it's hard for us to compare the two. Like your FERC accounting is here under number 5, so future leadership models. So some of those things were included. It's just hard to move between the two documents without time to compare.
So maybe we prioritize both of them.
Look, that's, my comment is, we've got a motion on the floor to accept Mark's list, and we can vote on that, and we also have another motion to accept IBL list, and vote on that.
Well, I think we've been we've all been sitting, for an hour and a half, and we're going nowhere.
And,
And, I made the motion to just accept mine, to get us off the dime, because we're not making a decision. I don't agree with, the city's position of just use the 9. If we want to somehow incorporate the 2 or score the 2, that's what I've been in favor of since day one. When I met with, him and Mr. Nail, remember, I said, we need to have a way to score these things. And then we met again, I was invited to a meeting with Mr. Porter and Adam and Mr. Nail, and I said to him, I even gave him a spreadsheet that showed everybody's name. We can have all of this, and we can all score them out, how they come out. That is the objective way to do it. But simply accepting the product of IPL manager, excuse me, is not a PUAB list. And when there's some things that need to be more emphasized, it may not be in the, maybe uncomfortable for IPL or the city. We seem to have left those in very obscure places. So I'm all in favor of scoring this thing if we have the option of having the items that I have highlighted as well as what is on the list now. Does that clarify it all?
That does to me, and as I said before, and I'll ask a question, Adam, if we accept both of these, can you give me a score sheet on each one to bring to the next meeting?
So the idea would be to score each one of these documents separately?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I suppose so. You just
Well,
have 2 different.
we're gonna sit here and discuss them, and we'll be discussing them next meeting at the regular meeting. And we got other people coming to the regular meeting, and, water and public works. We're gonna have to do something. And I think we should, score both of them. If everybody was sworn,
Do I need to withdraw my motion? Jack's vote says yes.
yeah, church and all that.
I'm
I
sorry.
withdraw my motion. I'd like to withdraw my motion, and then, when, are you gonna make the, who's gonna make the motion?
Sure.
I'll make the motion that the documents, as they are written, are put together, and we as individuals will score them out so that we can objectively have a picture of what our priority listing is from the PUAB perspective.
Is there the possibility of having a second meeting that's just this discussion as opposed to a regular business meeting? Because it feels like we're going to have more to talk about. Oh, excuse me. That was mine. I know we want to move this along, but I think this is a 5-year plan.
This is Thursday, and next meeting is the 19th. Only time we're meeting, on Tuesday or Wednesday. I'll be on Tuesday. So
Does it have to be done for the next meeting?
we have to get it done soon. It's something, that's a priority, we need to get this done.
Mr. Chairman, if we could all individually score these, homes, and bring the score sheet in here, that is tabulated while we're having a meeting on other issues, then we could have that tabulation given to us, so we could then see what everybody here agrees on. And
Go ahead.
all right, what I'm saying is, if we get that spreadsheet, send it out to everybody, when we walk into this room, everyone should have their spreadsheet completed. Print it out, mark it down, give it to our secretary, let her tabulate the votes while our regular meeting's going on, and we should have a result by the end of the meeting.
I told you you didn't get paid enough. I think we could bring it to our meeting, and we could, start out with water and, public works and get them out of the way and then go to power and light and discuss it all. Because I don't think we'll have that much from water and public works. Is that a motion? We have a motion on the floor. We got a second.
Check.
Yeah.
So we've got nine,
It's about,
we've got 9 on the one, we've got 6 on the other. Are we scoring 15? Are we scoring 9 and 6?
you're scoring 2 sheets, 1 9 and 1 6.
Okay, so we're scoring them separately.
We'll put them together at our meeting on the 19th.
We're still gonna have to be 1 through 15.
Yeah, you're gonna have to, I would say you're scoring 1 through 15.
Yeah.
Well, how are you scoring one? Okay,
Yeah, that's gonna have to be,
all right, we're scoring 1 through 15.
because some of them are gonna be all random.
Yeah.
We need to see, I guess, my point is,
Okay, can I have a vote?
Can I ask one quick question?
Yeah.
We're scoring 15 on both of these lists together, 15. There's so many that are similar or exactly the same. What are we gonna do when we take one here, one here,
It should
and they have
score,
different priorities?
it should score out. If you think it's,
So you could have the
if it's
same,
very important, you would make it a 15, and if you thought it wasn't very important at all, it should go down to like if you want.
scoring the same objective or goal, whatever it is, points, priorities twice. You're gonna get one number for one number for another. Like the total, grand total.
So if there's great setting on yours, setting on the others, they for me, we put in here. I think you'll find a big shakeout pretty much.
I think we'll do.
And is 1 the highest priority or the lowest priority?
The 15
Some of
should
them
be
say
high.
directions and then they
15 should be the high, 1 should be the low.
Okay, 15 is the high.
Call for a vote?
Question yet?
Yes.
Question's actually for Christina. I'm thinking with technology today, we could receive an interactive score sheet that we could score on, send it back, and she could have it tabulated and ready for us, rather than spending all that time pulling those numbers together during the meeting.
Did you do that, Christine?
You're asking for us to send out the score sheet to everyone, that they would all have to respond individually directly to me, not to all, and then I can calculate it that way.
Yes, dear.
You want it done yesterday?
So you're taking the one list, just adding the other list to it. And you're telling us that the highest priority is number 15. The lowest priority is
You can add another bullet on there, Christine needs a raise.
What do you think, Christine? Can you do that?
I'll let them
Would you do that?
So if we get that list to you in, short order within the next 24 hours, we shouldn't take long to find these things. What I would suggest is it's returned to us by Wednesday at noon. Wednesday at noon, and then that would give us sufficient time because during Christina doing that during the meeting probably isn't. Yeah, so do it at noon, we'll have the sheet ready for you by the meeting on Thursday. Okay?
I'm gonna call for a vote now.
Barry Porter,
Yes.
Jack Lee,
Yes.
Marlon Lane, Joe Zach,
Yes.
Mark McDonald,
Yes.
Dave McDowell,
Yes.
Virginia McConnell.
Good for budget discussion. Unanimous vote. Any other comments? We are adjourned.